ever been walking through the Navy Exchange and wonder why all the Naval Pride and Heritage gear is horrifically ugly and you wouldn't actually wear it? Have you ever wanted some really cool gear and you just don't know where to go? Well, I got you, fam. Go to dgutspodcast.com immediately. Get yourself some Naval Pride and Heritage gear you'll actually wear in public. We're working on new designs all the time, open to ideas. We're trying to create a brand that lets you display that pride, but doesn't make you cringe. Also, if you're willing to and you're able to, please go to patreon.com/dgutspodcast, pick one of the 5 tiers and become a patron today. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Don't Give Up the Ship podcast. It's going to be a Heritage episode, finally. Heritage Volume 5. This was actually Chief Bob's idea. I was supposed to do this a couple months ago, maybe, or 6 weeks ago when results came out for 8 and 9. He was just suggested it as a timely topic. And I completed the outline. I wrote everything up and then just never got around to recording it because full-time college and sleep hates me and all the things you probably already know. But yeah, I'm finally getting around to recording it. And while it's not like timely for the 8-9 results, it is. I just looked it up to make sure I was, because, you know, I've been out of the loop and it moved around a lot when COVID was going on. But I just looked up that the 7 board adjourns here in a few days. So results will be, you know, forthcoming not too far into the future. So I figured, why not now? And at least I'll be able to help out some Chief Selects, answer some trivia questions because it'll come up. So we're going to get into Super Chiefs, which is 8s and 9s, right? Just the history of how they were established, what they're for, a little bit of like analysis and opinion from me, and referencing some like USNI articles delineating the same kind of stuff. All the references will be in the show notes and in an outline on the website. So if you want to check those out, you can. But yeah, it's something that I wanted to go into it because it's something I've talked about during Chief seasons. Like I've talked about with the tradition of change. Like I've stood in front of groups of Chief Selects and given them the wrong information before a tradition of change was a document, before that research project was done by the Navy History and Heritage Command. All we had was the Goat Locker and hearsay, the goatlocker.org website, which a lot of the content on there is trash. It's like made up. It's not all garbage, but it's just very haphazard and like no sources or fact checking usually and stuff like that. So, and that pissed me off. I didn't like that I was being told, like, fed a line, you know what I mean? So that's one of the reasons, amongst others, that I got really into doing my own research. I was always that guy with like instructions and policy, but then when it got into the heritage stuff, I felt like I'd been lied to, and I felt like I'd made a fool of myself as a result, standing in front of that group of Chief Selects and telling them that, like, the history of the charge book, which was it's like fantasy when you actually read a tradition change. So for this, I wanted to share the history of 8s and 9s and where they came from and why and all those things, and kind of some of the progression that happened along the way, and identifying even just the need for a better utilization of Chief Petty Officers in general, and getting into all that. And then before I jump in, I was going to include this part of it in this episode, but it did end up being super long. And I'm just going to split it off into a spin the yarn, but I'm going to put one out. It'll probably be an Initiation Chronicles or something, just because that's what's coming up. But just somebody asked me once how I can be so critical of the Chief's mess and be so proud of being a chief. And if you could see this whole room, right, it'd be a great representation of how proud I am of being a Chief Petty Officer, accomplishing that, of the heritage of the organization, all that stuff. It's a dichotomy for sure, but I'm going to go into that whole analysis and just deliver that narrative and answer the question. And because I think there's a lot of chiefs out there asking themselves the same questions, and I think Chief Selects battle with that, right? Like you spend your whole time being a blue shirt and a lot of time demonizing the Chief's mess, and rightly so for a lot of reasons. But then there's also this other stuff. And I want to get into how you can do both, how it's okay to feel that way, and how you can use that energy to do good and be the chief that you always wanted, the chief that your sailors want, the chief that you believe the organization should be capable of. And why all those things are actually productive and how to use that energy. Because a lot of times people just let it eat them up and they get bitter. So yeah, I'm going to go into all that in a separate spin of the yarn. So just stay tuned for that. But yeah, super chiefs, right? What are they? Like, where'd they come from? Why do you care, right? So it's all it is. There's nothing super about super chiefs. It's just some thing somebody came up with that they thought sounded cool. Right around when they were establishing it. I want to say it was like a headline somewhere that somebody just made up when they were going to establish it. But all it is a logical progression, right? Every service has 8s and 9s, right? I didn't go into the research on when those were established, but I know it was way before us, because when you look into the history of World War II, like my grandfather was at the time the youngest sergeant major in the history of the Marine Corps. And that, it was, everyone was dying around him. So they fill those spots, as needed to keep the structure of the organization intact with all the battlefield casualties. So, it's not, all we did was look at the other services and make the logical next step. Right. And why it took us so long, I don't know. But there is some commentary on that. It's one of the sources, and we're going to get into that too. But all it is a euphemism for senior chiefs and master chiefs, serving in unique roles in the Navy since 1958. That's when they started to establish it. And like I said, the initial little introductory phrase I have here is like I was gonna get into it about timely because of 8 and 9 results, but I didn't do my homework on time, so here we are. But I'll cover the establishment of the history of the super chief, the establishment of, progress into the analysis of how and why they're utilized, and an attempt to posit a way forward, what kind of my narrative piece at the end, my analysis of like how they should be used and why. So, April 1st, 1893, we all know that. It's on hats and stickers all over the place, and the Navy won't let you forget it because you'll see all the chiefs in their big hats on April Fool's Day doing something. And that's when chiefs were established, and it became the top enlisted rank in the Navy, right? But then we progressed through World War I, World War II, and especially after World War II, when we scaled up the size of our force to answer the needs of that conflict. When it was over, you're left with a tremendous just overflow, just this inventory excess of chief petty officers and nothing to do with them. And there's a really great article in the resources that I highly recommend you checking out. But we had a glut of chiefs and nothing for them to do. This led to a watering down of their authority and responsibility, but also disillusionment with the organization. That's what's so cool about that article. And disillusionment with their role in the organization and their role within the Navy in general. And in the 1948 Proceedings magazine article titled "The Post-War Chief Petty Officer: A Closer Look," Machinist Mates Chief Richard McKenna distilled it down to two main problems. Though I'll focus on the second one as the primary problem because I just think it's the most important. And this is a quote from the article. It says, he's defining the problem that I'm talking about. It says, these may be defined as 1, the subjection to an apparently endless series of transfers, meaning they just kept moving these guys around to try to find a place for them and a gainful employment. And 2, the difficulty of obtaining a duty assignment commensurate with training and ability, right? So these guys have a ton of training, a ton of experience, and we're talking real world, wartime experience. That's very valuable. And in a peacetime military, it's very rare. So a lot of these people feel like they have a high level of experience and expertise, and they're not being used that way because there's nothing for them to do anymore. We don't have that giant demand of World War II anymore. So due to the top-heavy overmanning and some other issues, that's one of the main reasons they decided, hey, what can we do with these guys? Maybe we read the room. Maybe we find some parity in the other organizations, and we're just use the analogy. They have 8s and 9s, right? Well, let's do that in the Navy. So that it kind of led to it's just the evolution of our understanding of enlisted leadership as the other branches already had senior NCOs in the same ranks. So we're like, all right, let's do that. So creation, again, 1958. So the pay grades of E8, E9, Senior Chief and Master Chief were created effective June 1st, 1958 under a 1958 amendment to the Career Compensation Act of 1949, which is just a military compensation law, policy, whatever. Eligibility for promotion to E8, the senior chief level, was restricted to chiefs, permanent appointment with a minimum of 4 years in grade and total of 10 years of service. For elevation from E7 to master chief, because that happened, right? They were pulling from the chief's ranks to make 8s and 9s. So some people skipped a step. And if anybody knows any of these people, just off chance, I would love to talk to them. That'd be so fun. Hit me up. So that for elevation from E7, so from the chief level all the way to master chief, E9, a minimum of 6 years of service as a chief petty officer with a total of 13 years of service was required. And by today's standards, that's pretty young in the service, but and they're also saying a minimum of, right? That just qualifies you. And then from that pool, they selected the candidates kind of like we do today. The E5 through E9 levels included all rates except teleman and printer, which at the time were being phased out of the naval rating structure. People holding these ratings were absorbed or converted to yeoman or radioman from teleman. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that accurately. And primarily to lithographer from printer. Service-wide examinations for outstanding chiefs were held on August 5th, 1958, with the first promotions becoming effective on November 16th, 1958. A few months later, second group of chiefs from the February 1959 examinations were elevated to E8 and E9 effective on May 16th, 1959. The names of the first two groups of selectees are listed in the Bureau of Naval Personnel Notices 1430 of October 17th, 1958 and May 20th, 1959. It is noted that after May 1959, elevations and promotions to E9 were through senior chief only. So that after May 1959, there was no skipping the E8 level. Also, interestingly, they were taking exams for all these levels, which I think we should bring back. That's not going to be a popular statement, but I just think I think we should bring it back if we're going to stick to our guns and say that chiefs are the subject matter expert, I guess. I also think it would be very valuable, even if we redefine that, and I think we should, because you no matter where you are, you start leaning towards institutional expertise no matter what. Even when I was like the SDL of the schoolhouse, right? I used the SDL at CSA school. I was still instructing. I was still very much in rate, but the vast majority of my time was spent on personnel issues, evals, awards, that kind of like very much the institutional stuff. Not that I didn't have my hands in the other stuff too, but it wasn't the lion's share of my duties and responsibilities. It just wasn't. I had people for that. So I think there's a redefinition of the actual jobs that needs to happen. And I'm going to talk about that a little later about how that's not even real. Like I went looking for it, and there's no outside of a really bad bulleted list. Shout out to Ariana for finding that. Ariana, sorry, I just gooned that up. But the occupational standards, it's like a bulleted list, and it's a bunch of stuff that while it's like okay, I mean, it's really a document intended for probably for like the development of rating guides maybe, or even like the development of like enlisted career paths or some other type of criteria for selection or progression or qualification or whatever. But it's not a job description. There's not a document that I'm aware of. Again, I'm standing by to be wrong if somebody knows where it is or can find me anything that is like a real source document for the duties and responsibilities of a chief petty officer. Because we got into this whole thing about the Chief's Creed, which I'll probably share it at the end. I wrote a rough draft of a revision of the Chief's Creed. I don't think it's going to go anywhere. I've already gotten a little feedback saying, no, we don't need to change it. I'm like, yeah, you do, but whatever. But I'll read it to you guys at the end just for funsies. But yeah, there is no real definition of the role. So if we're going to continue to treat senior chiefs and master chiefs increasingly like institutional experts, I think that an exam reflecting that would be really great, especially, and like before everybody gets up in arms, and I'm talking to the cookie wearing people out there. If you've ever talked to a command senior chief or master chief, or even like an SEL, or I got on large platforms, probably a department chief, they want to blow their brains out during eval season because the quality of the product that's given to them is horrific. Almost always. And it's not like there's anomalies, right? Like my old cobb used to call me a secretary because I was really good at admin. Like, there's people like me out there. And the only reason I was like that is because I happened upon a really good chief that was really good at writing evals. And he trained me when I was in E5. But it's like, largely, there's a lot of institutional expertise stuff that is just like we're supposed to know, but like a lot of chiefs, let me tell you, a lot of chiefs don't have that aptitude. Because by no fault of their own, again, there should be schools for this stuff or correspondence courses or whatever, like some kind of a mechanism. But there should also be a measurement, right? And there's some psychology behind that. And I'll get into that in a foundations episode about like why testing actually enhances your ability to recall things. But that's another topic for another time. But anyway, I like the exams thing. That was a little bit of a tangent. I think it's a good idea. I think the way Army does selection board, that's for promotion too, like locally, like just the command doing it, kind of like you do a sailor quarter board, but hopefully, better. Anyway, so exams were required for these promotions, which I thought was kind of cool. So on July 1st, 1965, compression of several ratings at the 2 top grades was enforced. 6 new rating titles were created: Master Chief Steam Propulsionman, Master Chief Aircraft Maintenanceman, Master Chief Avionics Technician, Master Chief Precision Instrumentman, Master Chief Constructionman, and Master Chief Equipmentman. And I think you see this in one of the aviation communities, and it might be elsewhere too. I think it's like AZ or something like that. Don't quote me on that, or AV or something. But like where some aviation ratings that are all kind of in the same orbit. Shout out to aviation. I'm just saying, this shirt will be live very soon. Taste the rainbow. They merge them at the top because there's just not a need. Again, I'm not an aviation expert, but from my understanding, it's kind of like when you get to the top level, you're a maintenance master chief, or you go the CMC route. That's all I'm aware of. If there's another role, I'm sorry, aviation. I'm not an aviation guy. I just love this shirt. But and I love everybody. I'm trying to represent everybody, give you something you can wear. Shameless plug for Don't Give Up the Ship Apparel, dgutspodcast.com. Go get yourself some Native Pride and Heritage gear. Actually, we're in public. You're welcome. But yeah, it makes a lot of sense when they're kind of organizing those mergers just for common sense. Like, if there's only one role at the top, why would we have different ratings going to the Master Chief level? And then we run into the same problem that led to the establishment of Senior Chief and Master Chief, where we got nowhere to put them. It doesn't make any sense. So they merge them into their own ratings. And that way they limit the quotas too, so that they don't get that glut of extra Master Chiefs floating around at the top. So conversely, about 4 years later, on February 15th, 1969, some expansion at the Senior Master Chief grades eliminated Master Chief Steam Propulsionman. Expanded rates included Master and Senior Chief Torpedoman's Mate, Quartermaster, and Storekeeper, which are not... Storekeeper's a logistics specialist nowadays. And then Torpedoman left and came back, but thank God, because all the Torpedomen on submarines kept wearing Torpedoman rating badges, even though they were supposed to have machinist mates on. It was funny. Nobody cared either. Like, nobody enforced it because they should be torpedomen. They were really the only real torpedomen in the Navy, but somehow surface sailors got to be torpedomen and submariners didn't. It was real weird. So yeah, 7 ratings were reestablished at the E8 and E9 grades, presenting the opportunity for chiefs to again advance within their specialty to E9. The 7 effective ratings were signalman, mineman, air crew survival equipmentman, aviation storekeeper, aviation maintenance administrationman, didn't know that was real, and boiler technician. So now getting into the role of super chiefs, and again, like this document will be available on the website. Looking at Chief Selects for all these dates I'm spitting out. If you don't want to have to rewind, you can just download the outline to answer all those annoying questions you're going to get from people during the chief season. So the role of Super Chief. So the second edition of the Chief Petty Officer's Guide, shout out to Paul Kingsbury and the homies at USNI, explains the aftermath of the establishment, which for a time was largely symbolic. Not until the mid-1978 time frame did MCPON Tom Crow convince the Chief of Naval Operations to define the actual roles of Senior and Master Chief Petty Officers. It says that in the guide. I still can't find the document, and I talked to Paul about it, and I talked to some other CMCs, and I just can't get my hands on a document. I have emailed the Navy History and Heritage Command before, and I didn't get a response. Again, if anybody in the audience has any hookups or links they want to send me or whatever to get in contact with these people, that would be amazing. I need to revisit Navy history and heritage command because it's been a while. But what they're saying here is like the promotion of these people to senior chief and master chief, largely symbolic, because we didn't take the time to define what their roles would be as senior chiefs and master chiefs, which is kind of nuts. But it sounds like the bean counters and some admin people, they were just trying to figure out the billeting and like the where are we going to put all these people? How much do we need to downsize the force? All this other stuff. And they did that, but then they never really delineated what their role was going to be. They just gave them a new rank and pay structure and then said, all right, go forth and do great things, which is ridiculous. But, you know, so McPon Crow went to the CNO to remedy that. Apparently they did. I just can't find any explanation of what was defined as a role. But chiefs would be expected to be the top technical authorities within the rating. This is the continuation of the Chief Petty Officer Guide, 2nd edition. CPOs would be expected to be the top technical authorities within the rating, while senior chiefs would be the senior technical supervisors within a rating and occupational field. And master chiefs would provide administrative and managerial leadership on broader Navy fleet and force policies and processes, which would be incredible. I disagree with the next statement. This basic construct remains in place today. I don't think that's real. I don't think that's the way that they're treated. And I don't think it's the way that they're utilized. I'm a little biased because the submarine force kind of sucks at this, where technical expertise when you get to that level isn't really valued in the same way. You're just expected to go COB, which is our version of, it's Command SEL, like CMC. And it's to the point where they don't even think you should get promoted to that level without being a COB, which is ridiculous because there are submarine technical fields that only exist on submarines. And we need technical experts at the top level influencing force policy. That should be real. And it shouldn't be just a senior chief or a chief. It should be a master chief. We can get into that another time too if anybody wants to debate it. But anyway, I disagree that it's the structure we're using today. But again, that might just be my submarine experience. I do think the surface fleet's way better at this. Like I've run into a lot of, like at the selection board especially, I kind of got my eyes open to this a little bit, working with all these CS master chiefs and SH master, or RS, sorry, they're not SHs anymore. RS master chief. Shout out to my boy Ron. He's probably listening. And just all these like surface community or just outside the submarine community, really. LS Master Chiefs and RSs and CSs. And I got to kind of see that I think other communities value it a lot more, but they also have that luxury because they're so big. But anyway, so rather than look for increased technical authorities or where they could be assigned, where increased technical authorities could be assigned, the Navy expanded advisory positions. Can't find a formal policy document, but think about like they around the same time frame. I think it was in the 60s. I'd have to look it up, but they established like the command SEL position, and it was called different things. I actually have I gave one away. The other one's probably hiding out. Senior enlisted advisor is what it used to be called, and I have like, it looks like the career counselor puck, but it's white, and it's like the original version of a command chief or senior chief or master chief cookie. It's really cool. It's an interesting little piece of history. I gave one to my last CMC as a going away gift because he's a good dude. Shout out to Gabe. So with the two new pay grades, however, there came opportunity. The Williams Board, convened in 1959 to study the programs and the new rates, recommended the Limited Duty Officer, or LDO program, be expanded because of a junior officer shortage, and the Warrant Officer program be phased out. Instead, senior and master chief petty officers would take on some of the warrant officer duties. The issue again was analyzed in October 1963 by the Settle Board, which found that the expected functional overlapping of the duties of warrant officers and the new senior enlisted grades had not been demonstrated. The phase out of warrants had created a void effectively filled by LDOs and master chiefs, a void incompatible with the Navy's needs for more, not fewer, officer technical specialists. Accordingly, the warrant officer program revitalized with a corresponding reduction in the LDO program. I'm a little confused by this. I need to get into the Settle Board and what was the other one? Let's see, the Williams Board documents, if I can find them, just to understand the analysis, because I agree with what the Williams Board was looking at, but I don't have the data. I don't know if it's still relevant present day, all that kind of stuff. So I suspect the same thing, that like a lot of these Master Chiefs could do the Divo role stuff. Like you see food service warrants on aircraft carriers being the Divo, right? Being the food service officer. Why can't a Master Chief do that? And then there are like some of my contemporaries, some of my peers will come back with, because the instruction says you can't without a waiver from NAVSUP, blah, blah, blah. Okay, we can change policy documents. Like everything can be revised and is revised and updated. So like my point being, like I had a junior supply officer on a submarine that had no idea what they were doing until I taught them. So I was effectively the food service officer. So why can't I be the food service officer? I mean, all my evals at my last job said food service officer. So it's like, like there are plenty of opportunities where I believe a Master Chief could be doing those things, where I believe a Master Chief should be doing those things. Because if we're talking about being a division officer level function, an expert's better than a non-expert, and warrants are experts, to be fair. They pull from the expert community. So like I could see expanding the warrant program if it wasn't, I guess, if it wasn't selection based like it is now, if it was more like an advancement function, like you could go Master Chief or you could go warrant from Senior Chief, and you just like take an exam and like check the right box or something like that, or some other kind of a process. But it's a little onerous to become a warrant. I mean, it's really like if you've ever looked at the officer programs instruction, and particularly that application, and then you have to do all these interviews with people and all this other stuff, it's difficult. And you know, to be fair too, the warrant officer community is very like protective of who's, like, they decide who's selected. Warrants select warrants, right? It's self-selection, and they're selecting who they want, not necessarily who's best for the job. I'm just saying. There's no conspiracy there. I'm just messing around, but I just think it'd be cool if it was more of like you could just advance to the position kind of like a normal advancement process, where we kind of just considered the warrant process like a component of enlisted advancement instead of like an officer program, if that makes sense. Because they're not technically commissioned officers, they're warrant officers. It's different. But anyway, it's enough for that tangent. An idea before its time. This was really interesting because this isn't just me being a good idea fairy. They actually piloted a program where Master Chiefs were divos on a ship at sea. I thought it was really cool. I didn't know about it until I did the research. But for a time, Chiefs were filling division officer roles in a pilot program on board the USS Decatur, DDG-73. And while the Chiefs did well in the roles, the program was shuttered when a new regime relieved the CNO and the MCPON. MCPON Scott referred to this as recognition that our senior enlisted personnel are truly capable of taking on additional responsibilities. In many instances, they have been underutilized for a good period of time. Because it was now clear that CPOs could run divisions, the best qualified senior chief and master chief petty officers could be commissioned as lieutenants and lieutenant commanders as required to fill roles as ship's department heads. I don't know how I feel about that part, but either way, like I believe that there should be a path, and I believe that path should be less burdened by the administrative process of going through a selection board and the application and the interview appraisals. And it's like, ain't nobody got time for that. Like, come on, we got Zoom and stuff. Like, let's figure this out. Like, let's get something where I can just do something online, say, I'd like to go the warrant route. And then maybe the selection board interviews me via, Zoom or off Teams or whatever. And that's it. Or I take an exam and whatever. But it's like the process as it stands is pretty ridiculous. And again, if you've gone through it, you know what I'm talking about. It's archaic. It's overburdened with administrative rigmarole. It's not conducive to getting the best people in the positions, right? And I'm not saying you can be selective, because a lot of people like to say that process it exists the way that it does to make it purposefully difficult so that they don't get people applying that aren't committed or like aren't the right people or whatever. It's like, okay, well, just select based on criteria that you deem appropriate. And there's going to be like quotas anyway. So it's like, you're not going to over select quantity wise, and you're not going to get the wrong applicants. You'll get more applicants, but then just filter them out. Or there's other mechanisms you can build in so that you don't get overwhelmed with applicants. But anyway, I just think the process sucks. But I really thought this idea was cool. Whether they end up as O3s and O4s is a different conversation, but the idea that they can fill a Divo role, especially on a small platform, like very similar in size to a submarine, like larger, but not way larger, and functions very similarly in certain ways. I think it's very cool. And it's cool that like this isn't just me being a good idea fairy. This is like Mick Pond Scott and other like the CNO and all signed off on a pilot program to test this out, and it worked. So I thought that was very cool, and I think there should be an evolution in their roles, right? Like I don't like that they're not utilized in the way that I believe they should be, I guess, which is a selfish motivation, I suppose. But I just think that they could be leveraged in a more effective manner, like force wide, but particularly in the smaller communities. Assignment wise, I was going to get into this, but you got the senior listed marketplace nowadays. So they are trying. I wanted to note this because it's kind of like NLEC ELD, right? Yeah. I'd be remiss if I didn't say they weren't trying to do something to put senior enlisted in the best position possible, right? Like, there's been a bunch of occasions where Master Chiefs in the job I held as I was retiring decided to stay in the Navy, but they didn't want to be CMCs. And because the submarine community is so small and there's just not billets for in-rate Master Chiefs, which is criminal to me, they would force them back to sea, right? To fill a LCPO role that, I mean, on most submarines is filled by a first class or a chief, some senior chiefs. Like, if I'm going to pay you to be a Master Chief, I want you to do Master Chief things, which is one of the reasons I retired amongst many others, right? I was just like, I'm not going back to sea on a submarine again to do the same thing. They offered me other jobs, but it just didn't make sense personally. And for a bunch of other reasons, health and all that stuff I've talked about before. But that was another thing. Like, I'm doing Master Chief things as a Master Chief, period. And it goes back to that article that I read, like the quotes from at the beginning. It's like, you get dissatisfied and you eventually will get bitter and jaded when you're being treated like you're not that, like you didn't earn the 2 stars above your anchor. And while I think you should be more than willing to roll up your sleeves and get your hands dirty and do all like, I'm not above anything, but I worked really hard to get where I was as well. And I wanted to be in a position to influence the rate and I want to develop training. I want to influence policy. I want to do all that stuff. And granted, I got offered a role to do that and decided that I didn't want to move to Hawaii. I got offered the possibility of another job at the Senior Enlisted Academy teaching leadership, which is like my dream job, but it didn't make sense for a lot of other reasons. And I didn't have the juice to continue in service, period. But a lot of guys people don't get offered roles like that. They get forced back to sea, and it's wasted talent and experience and knowledge. Why are we paying them as a Master Chief? It's ridiculous. Doesn't make any sense. So the senior listed marketplace is an encouraging signal that they understand that these things are happening, that it doesn't make sense, and they're trying to remedy it. I'm not going to go into the details on that just because you probably don't care. Unless you're one of these people I'm talking about, like senior chiefs and master chiefs. But I mean, at that point, you should just do your own research. What the role should be. This is the fun part. So the actual role of a chief petty officer is hard to quantify. One of the most frustrating things about being a chief for over a decade was all of the unwritten rules, which I've hinted at or mentioned before. Cultural expectations and to be honest, bullshit that's involved with being a chief, with navigating that ecosystem, if you will, or that hierarchy. And this is separate, though a logical progression from a mission statement, who we are and what we do organizationally, which I also think is largely lacking. And without a foundational statement for what a chief does, how does one arrive at a definition of the roles of a senior and master chief? Great question. I have no idea. I don't. I think it needs to be done. I think the creed needs to be redefined. I think the mission, vision, guiding principles might need a slight update. I do think they're pretty solid. But in the marvelous traditions of our naval service, I will attempt to use my anecdotal experience hearsay, tribal knowledge, and unofficial correspondence to cobble together a pseudo analysis and call it good. So, with that being said, like I'm consistently frustrated by the listless nature of enlisted assignments for my entire career, largely all the way to the end. When I watched Chiefs with zero relevant platform experience get assigned to like an ISIC for a squadron, it'd be like me putting a carrier sailor as the ISIC at a Desron. If that, I don't know if they do that. I know you guys have like what's it called, the a float training group and all that kind of stuff that I think function as an ISIC. I don't really know. But you know what I mean? Like what I'm getting at is like putting people in positions that don't make any damn sense just because that's when their PRD was. It likely did harm to the support of those ships and crews and happened when there was a logical place to put them. And I'm referencing a real life experience here. Like this, I was flipping out because it just didn't make any sense. And his expertise and experience were extremely relevant to the place we could have put him. But instead, we put him somewhere else where it didn't make any sense. He didn't have any relevant expertise or experience, and it likely took away from the assistance that he was charged with providing, that was primary duty, to those boats. It's ridiculous. Like, we're throwing darts in the dark, which I'm encouraged by the senior listed marketplace for that reason, because hopefully it prevents things like this from happening. You know, I'll hold my breath. But yeah, I mean, we appear to be, hopefully, trying to remedy it, and then they got like advanced position, all this stuff. But the cynic in me assumes that they're doing this to satisfy some spreadsheet being green and not actually making an effort to make us a more efficient and lethal organization. It frustrates me that we're not more focused on that, because that's like our prime directive. It's like our sole reason for existing. I think properly utilized, the senior enlisted roles could do a lot more good Navy-wide. Admitting that we are not, in fact, the backbone of the Navy nor the pinnacle of technical expertise at the senior master chief levels would be a great start, arguably applicable to CPOs as well. A high level of technical expertise combined with a similar level of experience and the network that is the mess could create a technical manager, planner, and advisor that I believe we are trying to accomplish with warrant officers modernly. I think senior master chiefs can and should fill a scope of responsibility more in the realm of the CWO or DIVO than an LCPO. These roles don't need to replace those or even take much from them outside of erroneous responsibilities. There are roles to be pulled from and added to department LCPO roles that would make us a far more competent organization and make much better use of chiefs put in those roles. And then at the master chief level, we should be looking at them, replacing certain CWO designators. Don't kill me, Brian. Don't kill me, any other warrants that are listening. And DIVO roles, but not all of them, as well as accepting that certain roles require that level of attention. They should be intimately involved in all rate and community specific policy creation and revision, guiding not just how we do business, but how we train for both initial session and follow-on training. There should be no role for an old retired guy like me as a subject matter expert to be hired by a government contractor to develop training for active duty sailors in my source rating. But there is, and I signed an offer sheet for that job after retiring, and then it fell through because the contract blew up because we weren't ready to award it on the Navy side, apparently. That should be an active duty master chief. They're literally a stakeholder and the best person for the job. That should be a job they offered me while I was still on active duty, but they didn't. They're paying a civilian contractor to do it, and that blows my mind. And I'm not saying a contractor couldn't be involved somewhat, but the subject matter expert role that I was being hired for should be a master chief, period. Which you could argue it was if they hired me, but when they put that out, they were looking for somebody E6 and above. So they could have hired a first class that got out at like 6 years. That's not the person that should be doing that. And the Navy would have complete control over it if we didn't outsource it to a contractor. Anyway, and to go back to that warrant thing real quick, like I mentioned earlier, you could either have master chiefs replace some warrant designators, or just make an off ramp for a senior chief to become a warrant and make it less of a owner's process. But you would thereby be like expanding the roles and billets for warrants. Either way, I'm fine. I don't care how we do it, but I think that you need to pick one and do that. because I don't think we're doing a good job of that. And I don't think we're keeping the technical expertise. And again, a lot of this is influenced by my personal experience in the submarine community. I do think the rest of the Navy does it better. I should probably do a lot more research on all of the ways that Master Chiefs are utilized in other communities. But yeah, I think we could do a better job, but that's, I'll leave that there because again, there is some blind spots there where I just don't like. I do think other communities do better, but I also think that when our messaging is that you're the technical expert, it's like, I mean, sort of, but like at a 50,000 foot level, my experience informs my expertise in a way that makes me being in that position more valuable than someone who doesn't have that depth and breadth of experience. And yes, my level of knowledge is high. Does it mean it's like as high as a chief who's in it every day? Not necessarily. Could be if you kept up on it. But like, if you're not on the deck plate doing it, I would argue that the technical expertise, because that's a very, like, you can have technical expertise and then level of knowledge, totally different to me. Like, they're linked for sure, but they're very different areas. Like, I can have an extremely high level of knowledge, which when I retired, I had an extremely high level of knowledge. Does that mean does that mean I could go in the galley and outcook a senior second class? Yeah, I don't know. Technical expertise is that to me. The actual application of combined with level of knowledge. Does that mean that second class has a higher level of knowledge than me everywhere in the rate? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I don't think I've never ever met a first or second class that has a higher level of knowledge than I did when I was wearing khakis. That doesn't mean they couldn't cook me under the table. That doesn't mean that I never met anybody that could sit down and do the records and administration better than me. That doesn't mean they know more about the program than me. It's different. Supervisory element, compliance, policy, it's different. And that's where that sticking point for me is that the people that have that extremely high level of knowledge, large amount of experience, those are the people that should be in those positions. That's how I feel about it. So we talked about Super Chief, the history of why they were created, what they do now, why, and what they should be doing in my analysis, which again, I have blind spots. I fully acknowledge that I don't have like a super detailed knowledge of what senior enlisted do in every single community in the entire Navy, because how could I? I could do the research and get like a decent understanding, but I without being in those communities, it's very difficult to get that right. And so we talked about the value of them, why I feel the potential's untapped, and how we could do a better job of utilizing them. And this analysis might be a bit cart before the horse, in that the potential value may not be reachable given the current status of leadership development and education, which if you're a regular listener, you know exactly how I feel about that. But I think there's still plenty of unrecognized or untapped potential value, though room for growth. I hope it's made accessible through mechanisms like the senior enlisted marketplace and other programs aimed at realigning where they are and what they're doing. Hopefully that works out that way. But yeah, I'm just like, I'm not, you know me. I'm cautiously optimistic. Now I'll just for entertainment value only, I will read I gotta open it because I didn't plan this. Here we go. I'll read the draft revision of the Chief Petty Officer's Creed, and I would love feedback on this. I got in a conversation with somebody about it. They posed the question or idea or whatever of revising it. It wasn't well received, so I don't imagine this will go anywhere. But also, I'm not going to let go of my passion for it being needed. Like revision is needed, whether it's mine or someone else's. I don't care. I don't care if my input is completely ignored. It was when I was asked to do this, and I just thought it was a fun thought experiment, like a fun project to just, all right, if you're asking me, this is what I think it should be. And shout out to my boy Dan A lot of this was his idea. If you go to it's a link on the website. It's also in the Blue Jackets manual, like the older ones, and Teaching of the Creed curriculum. Short Talk with Chief Petty Officers. I did a podcast on it as well. So go check that out. It's part of the Initiation Chronicles or the Teaching of the Creed playlist. I think it's Teaching of the Creed playlist. But either way, it might be in both. But it's an incredible article from the early 1900s that was in the Blue Jackets manual directed at Chief Petty Officers. And it's kind of it's the best duties and responsibilities description I've ever seen. Some of it's not relevant to today's Navy because it was written in the early 1900s, but a lot of it is. And we were doing a podcast. I think it was one of the Teaching of the Creed episodes. If I'm not mistaken, it was Credibility of a Chief, because I thought it was funny and relevant that a first class be the one I'm talking to about the credibility of chiefs, because who better to judge? But when we were going through this article, Dan brought that up. He said at the end of the article, there's bullet points that summarize what they were getting at or what they were trying to get at in that article, right? The main points of that article. And he said to me, he's like, why isn't this the Chiefs Creed? He's like, this looks like a creed to me. This is who we are and what we do. A lot of the bullet point content in this is pulled directly from that. So I want to give credit not only to Dan, but to that article, for a lot of the content that I included in this fantasy world version of the Chief Petty Officers Creed. So, all right, here we go. For over 130 years, Chief Petty Officers have been charged with the profound honor of leading sailors. We do this with an understanding of our mission to create combat-ready naval forces ready to answer the call at a moment's notice. In freely accepting these responsibilities, we must understand and implement every detail of the following charge. The first bullet point, ours is a position of honor and responsibility. We do our work from a sense of duty to the fact that our sailors are absolutely entitled to the best possible leader you have within you. This right is inherent and rooted irrevocably in the sailor's willingness to trust us. Second bullet point, we have a position in which you must have expert knowledge of every detail that applies to both our technical specialty in the naval profession and the institution it operates within. Third bullet point, our duties in educating and training sailors of lower rank and experience are even more important than our direct responsibilities in connection with the mission. Fourth bullet point, our conduct in this position of special trusted confidence must be entirely above reproach, and our daily lives such as to set an example both from a personal as well as from a professional perspective. Last bullet point. No matter our warfare specialty or community, we will always bear in mind the critical importance of good order and discipline, and our role not simply in enforcing it, but modeling it. We will comply strictly with the formalities of military life and require the same of our juniors. And then kind of the outro at the end, we rise from the ranks from those we lead. We are not superior in any way, excluding the responsibility we willingly accept. It is a privilege to bear the weight of these fouled anchors, and it shall only remain so as long as we maintain these standards. That's my version. And I think it's more to the point. But as always, I'm down for feedback, criticism. If you're pissed off, how dare I? Again, it was for fun. Someone asked me to do it. I'm not going to tell you who. And it was sent to some people in some positions that may be in that loop of, or orbit or whatever, some people that could propose it to like the ones that matter, like the MCPON and the MCPON's leadership mess. But doesn't seem to be an appetite for it right now. If that changes, cool. If not, you know, I'm not, this one I'm not even cautiously optimistic about, just because it's kind of like the reaction to rating modernization, right? Like, try to change a chief season, like go back when they tried to, what did they do? They changed, I think it was something to I think when we first came out with CPO 365, like phase 1 and phase 2 or something, there was some kind of alteration, or I think it was when Stevens sundowned the name initiation or something like that. The old crusty Chiefs community component lost their shit. And I think that there's with that, and it's particularly with rating modernization, where the entire enlisted Navy lost their mind. I don't think there's an appetite for that. Not that if I got in a room with these people that I couldn't convince them that change is definitely needed if they don't already feel that way. It's more so the backlash that would be absolutely inevitable. Part of my proposal to like solve that wound, so is that the right word? I don't know. Is include, because I've always one of my critiques, like the quips I say, well, I'm critiquing the current Chief Petty Officer's Creed, is it sounds like a really good pinning script. So make it a pinning script template. Like when you revise this, you just release whatever policy document, an instruction or a nav admin or whatever. Where when we release the new revision of the Chief Petty Officer's Creed, you release a script that is like, this is the script template that you will just insert your information into and use. And it's that. It's a lot of that anyway. I think some stuff needs to get removed, but there's a lot of stuff in there that would sound great at a pinning ceremony, but it's not who we are and what we do. It's not a clear communication of that. And I also think there's some stuff in that runs contrary to what our values should be and what our values are as articulated by the mission, vision, guiding principles. So yeah, that's my that's my stab at revising the Chief Petty Officer's Creed. Open to feedback as always. If you need anything from us, hit us up. Don't Give Up the Ship Podcast at gmail.com. You can Facebook message us. Don't Give Up the Ship Podcast. You can DM us on Instagram, Reddit, or Discord at DGUTS If you want to support us, you can go to dgutspodcast.com. There's a donate button on the website, or you can go to Don't Give Up the Ship Apparel. Get yourself some naval pride and heritage gear you actually wear in public. And it's dgutspodcast.com, and then there's stickers and all kinds of cool stuff. I actually got some new stickers I can show you guys. Hang on, let me grab them. I got some cool new stuff. I got the little ones too. These aren't on the website yet, but I got some for Doc. I got to mail him some of these, and then I got some for Trash Panda for Ariana. They're like these like holographic ones. I got some little ones. There's a bunch of stuff that'll go up on the website soon. I'm doing a little bit of a reorg with how I like ship and warehouse things and stuff. It's logistics, but so that's why I haven't updated any of this stuff yet, but it's coming very soon. The shirts will be up first. Stickers will be up pretty quick too. But there's some other stickers that I need to like bring back to me, and I'm gonna ship those myself now, just because I have the coins too, and it's like the more I warehouse stuff, the more it costs. You guys don't care. But anyway, those will all be up on the website soon. And then the best way to support us, go to patreon.com/DGUTSpodcast. Pick one of the 5 tiers, become a patron today. It helps a ton. Pay the bills, expand the platform, all the fun things. And then, if you can't do any of those things because times are tough, inflation and all that, I get it. I totally get it. You can just like, share, subscribe, review us on all the platforms for all the things, right? Like share the YouTube videos, subscribe on YouTube, share the podcast, tag your friends, whatever. Review us on like iTunes, like it all helps for all the algorithms and elevating us in all the places so that it gets seen by the people that need it. So that helps, and we really appreciate anything you can do. Like even if it's only just listening, like we appreciate you. So thank you so much. And that's it. That's what I got for you today. Thank you so much for listening, and don't give up the ship. Hey, big shout out to our level 5 patrons, William McIver and Victoria Livingood, to all the other patrons and everyone that supports us. We couldn't do it without you. You're allowing us to expand the platform, pay all these bills, and continue to push out just awesome content for you as much as is humanly possible. And we really, really appreciate you. Thank you so much. Please hit the like button, drop a comment down below on what you thought, and subscribe to the channel.